Nike has unveiled a move that has instantly captured the attention of the sports world, placing Alex Eala at the center of a conversation that extends far beyond tennis. What began as quiet industry speculation has developed into a defining cultural moment, one that speaks not only to athletic achievement but also to influence, representation, and the changing face of global sport. When Alex entered the professional ranks, few expected her rise to accelerate at this pace. Traditionally, signature collections were reserved for legendary figures whose careers had already been cemented through years of success. That was the established path, but Alex's journey has never followed conventional expectations. Her ascent has felt less like a surprise and more like the natural arrival of a force that could no longer be ignored. Every match became an event, every appearance generated excitement, and every step forward carried significance that extended well beyond rankings and statistics. Major brands recognized something unique in her appeal. They saw not only a gifted competitor but also an athlete capable of creating genuine connections with audiences around the world. Nike, in particular, recognized a powerful momentum building around her. They saw a young Filipina star attracting international attention, inspiring supporters across continents, and creating a sense of belonging wherever she competed. This signature collection is therefore more than a product launch, it is a declaration that the standards for global stardom are evolving. Authenticity, cultural pride, and meaningful audience connection now hold tremendous value alongside competitive accomplishments. Naturally, the announcement sparked debate. While countless fans viewed it as well-earned recognition, others questioned whether the moment had arrived too soon. Critics pointed to experience, titles, and career milestones, arguing that such honors should come later. Yet those arguments reflect an older view of influence, one that struggles to keep pace with today's reality. Modern impact is not measured solely by trophies or years on tour. It is measured by the ability to inspire, unite, and shape conversations on a global scale. Alex Eala never waited for approval to become relevant. She built a presence so powerful and unmistakable that the industry eventually had no choice but to acknowledge it. Now the spotlight is brighter than ever, and the world is watching closely to see what comes next from a player who is rapidly redefining what it means to be a modern sports icon. What makes this moment especially significant is that the spotlight is no longer focused solely on how well the collection performs in the marketplace. The real fascination lies in witnessing what happens when an athlete evolves into a cultural phenomenon at such an early stage of her career. If Alex Eala is already commanding this level of influence, many are beginning to wonder how far her reach can extend in the years ahead. What major brands recognized was not simply her ability to win matches, but her rare understanding of the relationship between sport, identity, and modern culture. She wasn't just playing tennis, she was building a connection. While traditional sports narratives often revolve around records, championships, and dominance, Alex represented a more contemporary form of influence. She reflected a generation that values authenticity, relatability, and genuine engagement above carefully crafted perfection. That distinction gradually attracted attention. Initially, it surfaced through subtle industry discussions, media mentions, and growing speculation about larger opportunities on the horizon. Yet behind the scenes, a much deeper evaluation was taking place. While fans saw a talented young athlete rising through the rankings, Nike saw something far more expansive. They examined not only her performances but also the extraordinary response surrounding her. Her digital engagement consistently exceeded expectations, her audience continued expanding regardless of individual results, and her supporters demonstrated a level of loyalty rarely seen in modern sports. The relationship between Alex and her fans extended beyond competition. People were not merely following her career, they felt personally invested in her journey. Many saw parts of themselves in her story, making her success feel both inspiring and accessible. Her path resonated because it appeared authentic, hard-earned, and deeply relatable. That kind of influence cannot be manufactured through advertising budgets or media strategies. It develops naturally, and once Nike recognized its strength, the conversation moved to an entirely different level. This was no longer about placing a logo on an athlete or securing another endorsement agreement. It became about creating a platform built around a personality capable of shaping conversations and inspiring communities. Although the details remained confidential, industry observers increasingly sensed that the discussions involved something far larger than a conventional sponsorship arrangement. A signature collection centered on an athlete still early in her professional journey represented a bold departure from established norms. Traditionally, such opportunities were reserved for icons whose legacies had already been fully established. Yet Alex Eala was emerging during a period when the rules themselves were changing. The old blueprint that once governed sports marketing no longer seemed sufficient. Influence now moves faster, audiences connect differently, and brands are adapting to a world where cultural relevance can be just as valuable as a trophy case filled with titles. In many ways, Alex's rise reflects that transformation, and Nike's decision suggests they are prepared to embrace a new model for defining the next generation of global sports stars. For decades, the formula was remarkably consistent. Legendary figures such as Serena Williams, Venus Williams, and Maria Sharapova first established years of dominance before receiving the kind of signature branding reserved for the sport's most influential names. Success came first, commercial expansion followed. Alex Eala's trajectory appears to challenge that sequence entirely. Rather than waiting for every traditional milestone to be checked off, she has already become one of the most talked about figures in the sport. That is precisely what made Nike's decision so bold. By conventional standards, she remains in the process of building her competitive resume. Major titles are still ahead of her, rankings continue to climb, and her story is far from complete. Yet Nike's assessment seems to extend beyond accomplishments already achieved. The company appears to be investing in the momentum she is creating right now. Modern influence is no longer defined solely by trophy counts. Eala's impact has expanded beyond statistics and scorelines into something broader and more powerful. Crowds respond differently when she competes. Interest levels rise. Online engagement consistently exceeds expectations. Supporters from Filipino communities around the world rally behind her with remarkable passion and consistency. In a sport where global fan movements of this scale are relatively uncommon, that kind of response carries enormous value. Rather than waiting for a future peak, Nike appears to have chosen to align itself with the journey while it is still accelerating. The rollout itself was surprisingly restrained. There were no dramatic spectacles or oversized announcements. Instead, the launch followed a carefully managed corporate strategy, complete with polished messaging about emerging talent, innovation, and future opportunity. At first glance, it seemed like a standard business announcement. Then the campaign visuals were revealed, and the narrative immediately shifted. The creative direction avoided familiar themes of intimidation, dominance, or competitive aggression. Instead, it focused on identity, heritage, self-expression, and movement. The designs embraced bold aesthetics, distinctive silhouettes, and lifestyle-inspired elements that extended well beyond traditional performance apparel. The result felt less like a tennis collection and more like a broader cultural statement. Nike was not simply introducing Alex Eala as a promising athlete with a bright future. The campaign positioned her as a symbol of changing attitudes within sport itself, someone whose story resonates on levels that extend beyond competition. That distinction is what made the launch so difficult to compare with previous athlete partnerships. Journalists and industry observers searched for historical parallels, yet none seemed to fit perfectly. This was not a traditional endorsement built around established dominance, nor was it a straightforward marketing exercise. It represented a different kind of investment, one centered on relevance, identity, and cultural influence at a moment when those qualities are becoming increasingly important in determining who truly shapes the future of global sports. While many athlete partnerships are built after years of sustained dominance, this felt fundamentally different. It was a major brand choosing to elevate a rising star before the sport itself had fully confirmed her status, effectively challenging the rest of the industry to recognize the shift or risk falling behind. Analysts were not confused by the numbers, they were stunned by the speed. What followed the launch was not merely a successful release but a genuinely disruptive event. When Nike unveiled the Alex Eala collection, few expected any strain on the company's launch infrastructure. This is an organization designed to manage global demand surrounding World Cups, Olympic Games, and other massive international events. Yet within minutes, traffic surged beyond expectations. Reports of millions of users arriving in a matter of minutes reflected behavior far closer to a major cultural phenomenon than a typical apparel launch. By the end of the first hour, inventory across several regions had been claimed with remarkable urgency. That distinction is important, because consumers were not browsing casually, they were moving quickly to secure a piece of a moment they believed mattered. As the campaign spread across dozens of countries and generated enormous online attention, it became increasingly clear that the response was not driven by design alone. People were reacting to what the collection represented. They were not simply purchasing products, they were aligning themselves with a story, an identity, and a movement that felt larger than sport. That is why the demand appeared so immediate and emotional. Fans were less focused on comparisons, specifications, or price points and more focused on participating before the opportunity passed. Many sensed they were witnessing the early stages of something significant, and few wanted to arrive late to a moment that might later be remembered as historic. That was the development much of the tennis world failed to anticipate. Traditionally, the sport rewards patience. First come the victories, then the championships, then the legacy, and only afterward does the commercial machine fully engage. Eala appeared to reverse that sequence. Instead of following her success, the commercial momentum began accelerating it, creating a dynamic that left competitors, brands, and industry observers confronting a new and unfamiliar reality. If this approach proves sustainable, it could reshape the way the sports industry evaluates athlete value. For decades, rankings, championships, and career achievements served as the primary indicators of commercial potential. Now, a different possibility is emerging, one where influence, audience connection, and cultural relevance carry equal, if not greater, weight. For many within the traditional sports establishment, that represents a significant change. It suggests that modern sport is no longer creating only champions, it is creating figures capable of inspiring communities, shaping conversations, and driving global engagement on an unprecedented scale. The metrics supported the excitement, but they could not fully explain it. As analysts examined the launch from every angle, one factor consistently remained at the center of the discussion: Alex Eala herself. Not simply her performances on the court, not her rankings, and not her competitive record, but the effect her presence had on people. That distinction transformed the launch into something difficult to define using conventional frameworks. Historically, sports marketing follows a predictable cycle. An athlete achieves a major breakthrough, gains widespread visibility, and then translates that momentum into commercial success. What happened here appeared to challenge that formula. The commercial response arrived before the ultimate competitive milestones, indicating that another force was driving demand. Across multiple regions, similar patterns emerged. Supporters arrived early, online communities mobilized rapidly, and interest expanded well beyond traditional tennis audiences. What stood out was not merely the volume of participation but the intent behind it. People were not acting like ordinary consumers. They behaved more like participants in a shared experience, eager to be part of a moment they believed carried long-term significance. That dynamic attracted groups that rarely intersect with professional tennis. Fashion enthusiasts, cultural observers, trend analysts, and collectors all began paying attention. Each recognized the same underlying signal: this was not simply a product launch. It was a reflection of a broader cultural movement unfolding in real time. As that realization spread, the conversation evolved. The question was no longer whether the collection was successful. Instead, industry leaders began asking a far more intriguing question: what exactly does Alex Eala represent? Is she merely a rising star? Is she an emerging global icon? Or is she the beginning of an entirely new category of athlete, one whose influence expands beyond the traditional boundaries of sport? That uncertainty is what captured the attention of analysts most. The sales figures were impressive, and the visibility was undeniable, but those elements alone were not the source of fascination. The real story was that every forecast suddenly appeared conservative. Every projection seemed to underestimate the scale of the opportunity. When a young athlete can generate this level of worldwide attention and cross-industry engagement while still developing competitively, the future becomes exceptionally difficult to measure. The potential no longer fits neatly into existing models, and that may be the clearest sign yet that the industry is witnessing something genuinely new for retailers. The challenge during those first few days extended far beyond inventory management. The real question was whether they fully understood the scale and nature of what was unfolding. When demand accelerates at an extraordinary pace, the greatest risk is not simply running out of products, it is misjudging the significance of the moment itself. This is where Alex Eala's impact appeared to alter the traditional equation. Most high-profile product launches follow a familiar pattern: excitement surges, resale activity spikes, prices temporarily climb, and eventually the market settles into a more predictable rhythm. Industry observers have witnessed that cycle countless times. What emerged around this launch seemed noticeably different. Activity in secondary markets suggested a level of confidence that extended beyond short-term speculation. Rather than rushing to capitalize on immediate demand, many buyers appeared willing to hold their purchases, treating them as items with long-term significance rather than quick opportunities for profit. That behavior reveals an important shift in mindset. It suggests that participants did not believe they had arrived at the peak of interest. Instead, they felt they were witnessing the beginning of something with greater potential still ahead. That perception often creates durability where ordinary hype quickly fades. Meanwhile, the digital conversation continued expanding rather than slowing down. Content creators across multiple platforms were not simply posting initial reactions and moving on. They were producing follow-up discussions, exploring design choices, examining cultural themes, and analyzing the broader messaging behind the campaign. The depth of engagement became just as notable as its scale. Such sustained interest is rarely driven by excitement alone. It develops when audiences form a meaningful connection with the values being represented. Many supporters viewed Eala as someone who embodied determination without excessive self-promotion, confidence